there.
It wasn't dry.
That's what I'm saying. I don't see it. Anyways, I now call this meeting to order.
Hello.
Speak to it. Hello. All right, whoever wants to speak.
Bonnie, I think everybody's here. If not, they're on Zoom, so if you want to take over, you want, how do you want to do this?
So I think the initial item on the agenda is just public comment. So if there's anybody who wants to speak. I think there's people there, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And I know that we have at least one public that's on Zoom. So I guess nobody wants to speak. So we need to approve the minutes from the last meeting. Do we have them?
No,
Okay. The first item after that is that we have Ashley, who's appearing virtually. She is one of the trustees, and in order to allow her to participate electronically, we have to determine that she is not present at the meeting due to exigent circumstances. She has to work. She had, we weren't able to schedule it at a time when she could actually be present in Crescent City for the meeting. So it is up to the trustees who are in the room to make the determination if Ashley can participate electronically. I mean, she can listen in at any time, but whether she can participate in the meeting as a trustee to vote is up to you.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so you would need to make a motion to allow Ashley to participate in the meeting electronically due to exigent circumstances.
Motion to,
Somebody can just say so moved.
So moved.
We need a second,
Second.
and all those in favor?
Aye.
all us.
All right, thank you. So Ashley, you're eligible to participate.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So the first item, the next item we have on the agenda is the investment consultant report. We thought it would be good for you all to hear where you are financially before we started talking about the distribution of the assets. And I know that Jennifer's there. I saw her.
Let me pass out the reports to everybody. Right. So again, my name is Jennifer Gainforth, for those of you who I haven't met in person before. I'm the consultant on the investments for your police pension plan. I'm going to keep the report fairly. There's a lot of other stuff we want to cover that I think are very important today, but just so you can see from an overall standpoint where your plan currently sits. If you look on page 13 of that report, that will take you to your plan, your current asset allocation. So on the top left, you can see your total value as of June 30th was $1,111,027. You can see there, that's how it's allocated. You have about 59% is in domestic equities, about 15% is invested internationally, domestic fixed, about 25.6% of plan, and you have a little bit in cash equivalents as well. If you jump ahead to page 17, actually, you'll see how that asset allocation relates to your current plan's target allocation structure that we have laid out for you in the investment policy that you've approved for your plans allocation. So you can see as of June 30th, this has started to get a little bit out of compliance relative to your policy and your weightings for the different asset classes. Domestic equity, there you have a target to be 50% to domestic equity. That's going to be that black line, little bar chart there. And then we can have a allowable range. We give you the ability to have up to between 45 to 55% of your plan in domestic equities to keep your, the markets with the ability to move around during the quarters, but we don't want it to, drift outside of that range, because that will leave you in a portfolio that's allocated currently overweight to domestic equities. So let's put things at a little bit more riskier of a portfolio than our target is to be. You can see equities with your policy target, and then domestic fix is a little bit underweight there. So I think one thing that we should take care of today, in addition to what we're taking care of later, is to just rebalance your plan to get, those allocations into your compliance for your investment policy. To take some of that domestic equity, trim that back to bring that into your targets, and bring your domestic fix closer to that target as well. I'm going to hold off on kind of that full discussion, as we discuss what we're going to be doing later with Doug and Bonnie, and if we need to liquidate any of those funds, that could kind of play out some of that rebalancing. So I'm going to circle back to that really at the end of the meeting in order to get us into that allocation range, if that makes sense for everybody. So that is something that we'll look to take care of in a little bit. And then just to see from a performance standpoint, how your assets have performed. Take you to page 28. So page 28 is just going to show you the performance of how your plan has been performing over these trailing time periods. The second column there, your fiscal year to date. So your fiscal year begins October 1st. And so since October 1st through June 30th, your assets have returned just shy of 21%. So you guys have had a fantastic 9-month time period for the growth of your plan. It's been a very interesting year in the market. So you all have gone from about 1.1 million up to that 1.3 over the last 9 months. From a 1-year standpoint, you're up about 28% since last June. You have a 3-year annualized return, 13.6, a 5-year annualized return of 12%, and about 8.5% there over the last 7 years on an annualized basis. So your assets have grown at a great rate here over the last several years. You guys have seen great growth. Your managers have been investing your money very successfully. So I think in general, we should be very pleased with the growth that we've seen over that time frame. Any questions as it relates to just the investment side? That was pretty high level. I don't want to get too in depth on that today. So if there's no other questions, we can move on to Doug today, who will talk about really what our plan is as we move forward with your the assets here.
So I wanted to just, set a background as we move into discussion of, where we are right now. So the city terminated the plan effective March 11th of 2021 when the police department was disbanded. What that means for purposes of the plan is that all of the active members, all of the people who were employed on the day of the termination are 100% invested in their accrued benefit. That doesn't mean that they have more service than they accrued. It just means that they're entitled, even though they weren't vested, they're entitled to the benefit that they had accrued until the date of termination. The Florida statutes has some particular provisions regarding the termination of the plan and basically sets in the board's responsibility the requirement to actually terminate, to carry out the termination of the plan. The city makes the decision to terminate it, but the board is responsible to carry it out. And so, we as the board need to make decisions. So you have to determine the date of distribution. You have to determine the asset value that you need in order to fund all of the non-forfeitable benefits. The pension board has to determine the method of distribution. We have a responsibility to look at the assets and make some decisions in the best interest of the participants and beneficiaries. We have two kind of different groups that we're considering. One is the active members. The other is the retirees, people who are already in receipt of benefits. There's essentially 3 ways that are outlined in the statute of how the plan can be terminated. So you can make a lump sum distribution of all of the benefits in the plan. You can purchase annuities, or you can set up what's called a substituted trust fund. The statute also refers to other ways that you can do that. I haven't necessarily seen any other way that it's done, but I have seen ways that are a combination of the choices. So again, you can distribute all of the assets in the plan. You can purchase annuities, and you can create a substituted trust fund, or a combination of lump sums and one of the other choices. You have a letter from Doug, and Doug will go over it in detail, which really goes through the kind of the costs of those kinds of things. I think the other piece of background background information that you need to be aware of is that it is the municipality's responsibility to fully fund any of the benefits in the pension plan. So that if something costs more than the money that's available in the plan, it is the city's responsibility to make that actuarially sound. That's based on a Florida case out of the city of Lake Park and their termination. So, just kind of keep those ideas in the background as Doug goes over that impact statement. Doug, do you need me to discuss any other background information before we move forward?
Does microphone work?
It does. I can hear you.
Maybe I'll just sit next to Jen
Yeah.
here. Yes, Bonnie, you covered everything very well, so you're about to give me a way here.
And you've passed out all of your letters.
Actually, I'm going to go into the audience here.
Okay. Ashley, I think you have a copy, right? If you don't, I can email it to you. Okay, great.
Okay, so it sounds like I'm up, numbers guy. Happy to see everybody here. I am Doug Rosen with Foster and Foster. We've been the actuary for a lot of years, when we were in the chapter plan, and then when it became local law, and now, of course, as we're making this transition. I did pass out to everybody in the room a handout. I won't go over every single detail, but I will go over the numbers, and it's really three scenarios. Blip, or did somebody need to get up? Hold me. No, just a blip. Okay. As Bonnie, plan termination, once the city does that, it sets into motion events. And the first is that, and on the date of termination, calculate everybody's benefit. It's frozen. We use their pay average up to that point, the 3% multiplier for all years of service. And then we 100% vest everybody. So even if someone had 2 years in, it's a small benefit, but it's 100% vested. And what our job actuary is to put a dollar value to that, a cash out value. And the way we do that is we project out into the future using assumed life expectancy, using standard life tables, which generally assumes people live to about age 80 or 85, somewhere in that range. And assume that men would get 7%. So what we do is we person individually take the monthly check they would have gotten, and we bring that back to a lump sum value today and say, that's what you would need to invest today at 7% interest to pay for all of those future checks. So in lieu of getting those checks, you can just pay out the lump sum and it's done. Just like you can either buy a house with cash or you pay it off over time. Pay off over time has interest. So it's either you make those stream of payments or you pay the lump sum. Same thing here. So all of these scenarios I'm going to go over deal with lump sum amounts. And I think Bonnie and I will do a little tag team here, but she's already aware that you have to make the decision. Although I'm going over 3 different other combinations of scenarios if desired, that kind of discussion. But in the end, you as the trustees, as the board, you determine the disbursement of the benefits, the method. So I'm going to start getting into some numbers here. It won't take too long. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. But before I do that, do you have any questions? Anything I can answer up front? Okay.
No.
All right, we're going to all of the caveats, all these bullet points, just point to anybody in, say, another actuary or anybody in the city or the pension board, you know, what did we use as the background, you know, what different parameters were used to come up with these numbers. So that's what all those bullet points are. So I want to jump right into the three scenarios, starting on the second page. Now, this scenario, call it scenario A. There are 12 people in the plan. They active anymore, but when I say active, I mean on March 7th of this year, they were active. So we have a combination of active benefits, and then we had a couple of people who had left years ago, and they were either due a benefit in the future, or they were only due a refund. That they had left non-vested, and we were just waiting to pay out their member contributions. So there was 12 people total. Scenario A looks at a full cash out, take all 12, and that method I described of lump sum cash out, that's what this scenario is here. So I won't go through all names. I mean, that's self-explanatory, you can see in the list, but you can see the member's name in the left column, what their status was on this year on the plan termination date. So some were active. There were 2 refund due. Those were people who had left prior to March 11th, 2021, and some years ago, and they were due only their contributions back. There was one vested. That member, I believe, is getting pretty close to retirement status. He had left a while back and he was getting close to age 50 or 55.
That'd be January.
All right, that's right, January 1st, 22. And then, of course, we've got some retirees. So I did everything line in the sand as October 1st of this year, so 16 days from now. If you elect as the board to say, we're everybody out, that includes retirees, everybody, all 12 people, and we're done. Then that cost would be that sum at the bottom, $901,249.06. Question is there enough in that? And the answer is yes. I heard Jen's report. I owe her lunch, I think. I was texting her over the weekend and said, hey, I'm wrapping up this report. Do you have a current market value of assets? Lo and behold, on Sunday after. So as of last September 10th, last Friday, there was over $1.3 million in the trust fund. I put the exact number here several places throughout. It's like 1,353,000. So scenario A is you cash everybody out and you have an excess of $452,000. So the question is, what do you do with that then? Well, under that scenario, I need to do a follow-up analysis because the state stands the Division of Retirement and says, well, look, you've been getting challenged these years. We want as much of that back as you give us. And that the reason they would ask is because you would have $450,000 left over after cashing everybody out. So we'll swing back to that. If the decision you end up making at the end, you know, then we're going to have to talk about getting that follow-up analysis where the state problem. My guess is because the city had a very low requirement many years, that most of that 450 goes back to the state. But I did not run that analysis because I wanted to wait until I saw what the board's decision was today. Bonnie, before I jump into B and C, do you have any commentary or?
Yeah, so I mean, I wanted to explain that for the retirees, this means if this is the choice that you elect, it means that's all the money they're ever going to get. You know, we had promised them benefits for the rest of their life. And, you know, if this is the method we choose, they're not going to get any more money. So my suggestion would be is, that you consider, giving those members a choice of whether they actually receive a payout of that lump sum amount, because we have already made that promise to them. And I think you'll see later on that their ability to buy the payment stream that we're giving them, costs more money.
Thank you, Bonnie. That's a very good point. If you pay out a retiree their lump sum all at once, they have to figure out a way to make that money last. Whereas right now, what they're getting is what was promised, a defined benefit, a check for life. Okay. All right, so I think I've covered all the points I need to in scenario A. Before I move into B, any questions or comments? All right, so let's jump down to B. This one is cash out for certain plan participants, and then we purchase annuities for the remaining. Meaning that list we just saw in scenario A, we would take some of them and say, here's your money. But for those who are retired or getting very close to retired, the January 1st gentleman, we would go to some private company and say, well, look, the city's getting out of the pension business. Really, you can put a new name to scenario B. It's city get out of pension business. And we would ask the private company for a quote, and that company would come back and say, well, what's the age of the member, male or female? And what are you paying them? What's the guarantee? What's the form of benefit? Do they have a spouse? Do they have an annuitant? Are there two people attached to this benefit? And then you would get a quote back. And I will tell you that quote's going to be pretty high, and I'll show that to you in a second. But let me show you how I broke out the membership into two groups. So look at that group of 12 under scenario A. The group at the bottom of this page comes from that group of 12, and these are the members who were active on March 11th, or the two that were only due a refund of contributions. So if you cash them out, it's $103,811 come out of the trust fund. So you would think, well, then that means the remaining you have to pay them $800,000, right? Because look at that top number under scenario A, it was $901,000 total, right?
Right.
And we pay out 103. So you think, well, we should come up with another 800,000 for the retirees. Well, flip the page over. It's not 800,000. What number do you see there in full? Yeah, 1.36 million too. Well, wait a minute. You came up with 800,000 difference. Why is it 1.3? That's the point of going to a private company. They're not going to want to lose money. It's like going to an insurance company and saying, we want to buy an annuity. And that company's like, well, we're not going to lose money on this. So they're going to give you a very low interest assumption, because they're going to want to take that money. You would give them money and they're going to invest it somewhere, and they'll pay the checks to the retirees. Well, they are going to invest it somewhere and try to make money, but there's risk of doing that. So you're paying for their risk. You're paying for a private company's risk. That's why instead of it being 800,000, it's 1.36 million. So the net result is, if you choose scenario B, cash out of the actives and the two do a refund and buy annuities, and the city's out of the pension business, there's a cost to it. The paragraph under the chart at the top of this page shows that the total is $1,464,000. Annuity purchase plus the $100,000 cash out. Well, your returns have been phenomenal this year. Your assets have had phenomenal growth, but it's still a little bit short. Yet the city, if you did scenario B, the city, in my estimate, would have to come up with about an extra $110,000. And that's just a guess, because I can take a guess as to what a private company would charge for annuity purchase, but I can't guarantee the rate. I think it's a reasonable guess. So scenario B, get out of pension business. City probably writes a check for another $100,000 or so.
So just,
Yes, Bonnie.
I just wanted to add a little color around that. So we recently worked actually with Foster and Foster on a termination for the city of Brooksville police pension plan. And they were too small, so they were bigger than you, but too small to get someone to quote to basically replace the pension fund. So the pension fund was in the position where we had to shop individual annuities. And so the city there had to put in a significant amount of money in order to make it to close the plan entirely by purchasing those annuities. So, you know, my guess is that you would be too small for an insurance company to come in and say, you know, we'll take over the whole group of people, which, you know, allows them to have some economies of scale and do some scaling of the risk. But in this case, my guess is that you'd have to buy individual annuities, which likely would cost more, as Doug said at the end.
Also, very good commentary. Thank you, Bonnie. So any other questions or comments on scenario B? All right, let's jump down to the last then. This would be a cash out for certain members, and then we would establish a substitute trust fund. Basically, it's keep the valuation running, you know, keep the trust fund in place, but pay out those who were active on March 11th, and the two do a refund. So you can see that you've seen that same group of people before on the prior page, comprised of 7 members, and again, 103,811.71. That would come out of the 1.3 million. And if you flip the page over, the 5 retirees plus the 1 vested terminated, the gentleman retiring January 1st, we would keep them in the trust fund and pay out the checks. The checks that are currently being paid out, we would continue. And then we would commence with this on January 1st. And we would come back and keep doing the annual valuation. It would be the same kind of status quo, just no receipt of future state monies under a substitute trust fund. Those are cut off. Okay, so the bullet points on the top here simply lay out really for another actuary to look at to see if the numbers make sense. I'm laying out the assumptions and the methods for funding. Bottom line is you would still be over 100% funded under this scenario. You take the $100,000 out and be done with those who were active plus 2 do a refund. The remaining 5 we would pay out, and by keeping them in the trust fund and not buying individual annuities, we keep the liabilities lower. So under this scenario, the city's funding requirement in year 1 is $0. Now I have to keep coming back every year and redo the valuation as always. You know, it's the actuary who always runs the valuation and presents it to the board. And I would measure each year to see, you know, will there be a funding, and it's possible there could be a funding requirement in the future. But initially, your funded status is about 107, 108%, meaning there would be no initial funding requirement from the city in year 1. So that is it. Those are the 3 scenarios. Bonnie, did you have any commentary on the 3rd scenario?
So on the 3rd scenario, you know, you would give the opportunity for the active members to take a lump sum, which they could roll over into another type of investment for their retirement. And you would, you know, really kind of honor the promise that you made to the retirees to pay them on a monthly basis. I think that, you know, the only, and I'm going to air quote downside to this scenario is that there has to be a continuing ongoing trust fund. So the city in the trust agreement would have to establish a board of trustees to continue to run that and to make the investments in the so that you can pay the retirees on a monthly basis.
So for the guys getting cash out, the actives and so on and so forth, are they gonna be, is there a penalty involved with?
If they,
getting
if they take cash money today, when you decide that you're gonna distribute the assets, if they take cash money, and they're not at least age 50, they'll be subject to an early retirement penalty, for taking that distribution.
About how much? Roughly, is it a percentage or?
It's a 10% penalty that goes on your IRS, your IRS form. If each distribution, if it left the fund in cash, would also be subject to a 20% withholding for income tax. And that probably wouldn't be enough for the members. They probably would owe more income tax on that.
Bonnie, if they roll it to a qualified vehicle, then they could avoid any kind of taxation or penalty now, right?
That is correct. So, if they have a 457, or if they're in the investment plan for the state, or, some sort of an investment plan at their own city, they can roll this money into that or open an IRA.
So I've covered the scenarios. Of course, you can create other scenarios where, and these were created from the June meeting, where I kind of got feedback of, which folks would probably be cash out. Those are the ones who are active. They had 3 or 4 years of service in, and the remaining staying, continuing to get checks. You can pick other versions, like, well, what if we pay out this one retiree? He said he might want it, or something like that. It's all neutral. These numbers won't change. The future valuations might change, but these all have the same actuarial equivalent. So if you wanted to do the substitute trust fund route and pay out more or less than the group I'm showing here, it's going to be the equivalent. The answer to the city in year 1 for funding is 0.
What about year 2?
You have to see the actuary every year after that. That's a downside Bonnie didn't want to tell you is not only set up a substitute trust and set up a new board, you have to see the actuary. Now, you could say, just come back every 2 years. We're overfunded, and that's fine.
Well, that would last till whoever's left to the last one dies. So that could be 30, 40 years.
Yeah, theoretically.
Yep.
Or at some point down the road, maybe the retiree comes and says, look, can I just get a cash out? We could go through this again and maybe, do that.
Doug, I don't mean to interrupt. It'd probably be good to point out which scenarios that they would have to maintain a board for until the end of the time too.
Yeah, Bonnie, the gentleman had a question of which scenarios would require a board. After this is done, I think it would just be the substitute trust, right?
That's correct. That's correct. Just scenario C. Scenario B, while the members would continue to get monthly benefits, the retirees would continue to get monthly benefits, that responsibility would be passed on to the annuity companies. But it likely costs more money than is in the plan.
We need to make some decisions there.
So, does anybody have any?
Honey, I'm just a
Well,
citizen
I
advisor.
gotta see what he, you know, he's got the most in there, so I'm trying to see what he thinks too.
Jack, can I speak? Is that possible?
I don't mind, yeah.
Okay. I mean, just for my own scenario, I know what my actuary payout is. And, I would prefer, because of my age, I'm only 55. I prefer to collect the monthly payment. And adding my wife to the benefit, she's younger than I am, so I prefer to have that monthly payout. So, I mean, you're right, it could go 30 years, it could go 35 years.
Yeah, that's why I was,
Or longer. but,
Yeah.
You know, and also, I'm willing to be on board like I was before. So, you guys need board members.
What do you think?
Just thinking that,
Well, I know what almost all the actives and I know what they want. So which pretty much every option falls in line with what they want. And that's just to be done with it, so. It's gonna fall.
right.
Got one that's gonna be collecting it and one that collects it, so it's gonna come down to pretty much you two on what you want.
Not to interrupt again. Is there a scenario, because now it's kind of like it's two of us, is there a scenario where we can split up?
So you're talking about sort of like modifying scenario C?
Correct, if chief wants payout.
Yeah.
Then he could get the payout if that's what he wants. I'm not saying that's what he wants to do, but if that's what he wants to do, and I want to collect.
Yep.
I want to collect the check, is that a possibility as well?
Yeah, that's,
He mentioned that earlier.
yeah, scenario C, you're gonna get the same answer as far as the funding for the city. The answer is 0. You would simply transfer, it sounds like one or two of the members from the retiree that we were going to hold a check.
Mhm.
And because we know what the lump sum is, we would just transfer them into the first group and pay them out. It's a wash because yes, you pay out the cash now, but then we're not funding for it in the future.
Right.
We don't anticipate any more payouts. So yes, scenario C, you can modify any which way you want, and you're gonna get the same net answer.
Depends if he wants a check or you want a big check or he wants a check for the rest of his life.
Yeah, you can, so you can offer that to the retirees as an option to take the lump sum amount of money in lieu of the monthly benefits. You know, I mean, I'd want to make sure that they understood that that's it. You're not getting any more money. So if the market tanks, you know, that we've paid you everything that's due to you.
Robert, you can invest your own money.
uh,
You can do it your way. If you want to do something different,
Right.
or IRAs, like she said, you can do IRAs and cut some of your taxes.
I'll go over and what you got working up there with the state.
Yeah. Chad really don't have a choice. It's sad.
Yeah, I'm good with it.
Yeah, but you get IRAs, so
Yeah.
no tax. So. Or roll it over to wherever you're working, so.
And I mean, we obviously would advise them to seek, legal and financial advice before they made the decision to take the lump sum.
So we don't have to, what do we have to make a motion for today? This is.
Yeah, so you need to give us some direction, because essentially what we'll need to do is to develop a process around it. So, we'll have to draft documentation, depending on what you say, notification to the members that we intend to terminate the plan, effective as of a certain date. And here's what the choices are. And if you're going to give them the choice to choose between receiving benefits for the rest of their life versus a lump sum option, we would need to give them the information to make that decision, give them a time period to make the selection, and then to let us know. So, essentially it would be like January-ish, when we would be able to establish like if you go through the substituted trust fund, we would, it would be January-ish before we would be able to do that. I mean, obviously, we're not going to make the distributions on October 1st, because we won't have all the paperwork signed and returned to us at this point. So it just, we'll need to put that all into place. So yes, you would need to give us a decision about how you would like to progress.
I need to throw in one piece here too. Bonnie, if we go the substitute trust fund route, then we'll have to do an impact statement and.
Correct.
So, going forward, the city has no obligation in the first year. That it's possible when we do the impact statement that there might be one final requirement from the city. The reason being, the last valuation we did was October 1st of 19. We would be going back to that date with assets in place as of that date and measuring all of this. On a go forward basis, when we do the first substitute trust valuation, which would be, it sounds like October 1st of 2021. It's at that point going forward that the city's requirement is 0. So I just want to be on the record that when we do the impact statement for this, there's a possibility that there's one final requirement of the city to make everything whole. I don't anticipate it's a really big number, but I'm thinking out loud in that because everything here is based on, as of 10/1 of 21, recognize a tremendous investment here. And when we do the impact statement, we have to roll back to the last valuation. But your decision on any of this, whether some retirees get a payout or not, that doesn't, it's going to be the same answer. If the city has one final requirement, it doesn't matter who you pay out or who continues to get a check. It's all going to be the same answer.
So my question is, if we were to go with option 2 or 3, whichever one is right now, and the way it's set up, and then somewhere in the meantime, him as a retiree decides before everything's final, you know what, I would just rather take the cash out, then he can do that.
You mean
That's something that's got to be decided tonight.
If that's what you decide, if you decide to let the retirees take that choice. Yes.
Doing that.
That way, why they can make that choice of what you want to do.
Okay, then it just comes down to option 2 or 3, where you guys want your money to go. And that's what it comes down to. Right, Joey, and then how
Yeah.
saying the same thing.
Yeah.
So where you want your money to go is what basically the difference is between the two. Kind of option number 3 is kind of basically what. I mean,
That's what it is, yeah.
scenario C?
yes or sorry.
Basically.
Yeah, it's just a transition from how things have been operating into
Right.
just no state monies and everybody's benefits are frozen.
Number 2 is
The annuities, basically.
And number 2 is city gets out of the pension business. That's scenario B. That's where you'd be shopping individual annuities for
Yeah,
whoever wants them.
I'm not crazy about annuities. But that's up to you guys. I just try to give you a little feedback. Annuities are good for certain things and a little bit of money to protect your investment in something else in case it does tank.
Well, for these individuals, though, the annuity would be purchased by the plan under scenario B. And the city would be responsible for making up the difference of whatever money that the fund did not have to purchase these annuities. Under scenario C, the money to pay the retiree benefits would be out of the trust fund, and then the city would be responsible to make it actuarially sound, but over the lifetime of the members. So in scenario B, the city would have to put in the money now that we're short so that we can buy the annuities. The scenario C, you'd continue to operate the way that you are, and the city may or may not have to make a contribution on an annual basis over the lifetime of over the remaining lifetime of the members. For the retirees, I should say. It's more clear.
Suggestions?
Well, I'll give you my suggestion. If I was in the plan, I'd go with C instead of B.
Think if I was in the plan, regardless of.
Yeah,
Not the same having to pay, I would probably
but it all
C
depends on
too.
the age too, if you want to buy out or,
Probably go with
but
C.
I'm just trying to protect Bob's share now.
Right.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Well,
I
I'm just saying, you kind of want C, you want to benefit for the rest of your life and
Right.
your wife's life,
Right.
which is really, to me, the best interest of the city would be C. To me, now, I don't know, if somebody could correct me, I'm not sure, but that's what I would say. I don't have a business degree, but I just do my common sense. So,
C.
I think C provides the most flexibility and, costs the least amount of money.
I think money's a little safer.
I think
Poor chances, you're just out.
And I should say costs the least amount of money in the short run, right? I mean, over the lifetime of the fund, the city could have to put in money to run the fund, but I think, I do think that C provides the biggest level of flexibility and the least amount of upfront money.
And then some years, the city probably wouldn't have to put some money in if the market did good or not good. Is that correct?
That's my understanding. So Doug should answer that, but he did. So one of the things that he did was to build in the cost of the pension plan. So he accounted for a $35,000 annual cost using a 7% investment rate of return. So he expected, he includes in the cost of the plan, the expenses. And
Administrative and management expenses, because you use 7% gross of fees. I ballpark 35,000 annually. That will be adjusted every valuation. That might have a little conservatism built in for you. So even then, it's still in the first year of substitute trust, 107% funded.
Well, how are we gonna do some of these other ones that are still retired? Like Chief Schultz, does he want to pay out or?
so we'd have to send out documentation to them to ask
I can give them that option.
Yeah.
if that's the choice that you make. So it would be scenario C with the option for the retirees to elect a lump sum instead of the lifetime of benefits.
That's the motion.
I so move on that.
Yeah. A second.
Did we take a vote? We had a first and a second.
Yes. All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, so I think, the next item was to establish a timeline. I think that was aggressive. I think what we're gonna do is I'll tell you that we'll need to meet at least one or two more times. So first off, what I will do from this is begin to develop a substituted trust fund. Alongside of that, we'll put together the documentation, releases and elections for the members, letting them know the amounts of money that they, would be entitled to from the active side, and then the refunds and contributions. Give them paperwork that they would need to sign, and for the retirees, we would provide them with information that they could take a lump sum, or they could be in the substituted trust fund, and make sure that we document all the things that they're eligible for. So in other words, their monthly amount, and then who their survivors are, or the option that they chose at the time that they retired. So we'd give them all of that information, and then they'd have to fill out the paperwork as well. Again, we would recommend each of the people to seek out financial and legal advice, before they made their choices. And then we would need to establish a distribution date. So Doug, in this scenario, would we be able to just make the distributions as the paperwork comes in? Because we're having the substituted trust fund at the bottom, so whatever's in the trust fund at the end is whatever's in this fund at the end is what we would transfer into the substituted trust.
Yes, I'm fine relying on the numbers in this report.
Okay.
Something to say with this. Are you going to need to move anything around?
So
Make it
everything's
available?
in mutual funds, so everything is fairly liquid. So whenever we need the funds, it's already there. I know currently there's about almost 50,000 in cash. I think your state money's recently just come in. So there's some there already. So people started to flow in. There's already cash sitting there, and then we can start to liquidate as needed.
So how does that affect me? In the sense that if the payouts start January 1st and we're still figuring out where the money's gonna go in the fund and all the paperwork and all that, where does that have to be made? You said you talked about meeting like 2 more times. That's,
I guess he's asking if it's not done by January, is he gonna be getting his money come January?
So, we would time it so that, the payouts coincided with the monthly benefits. We would continue to make the monthly benefits.
Okay.
And so we would have to reduce, I think that's one of the things we'd have to coordinate is reducing the lump sum that would be paid out if we're continuing to pay the monthly benefits.
Yes. I would say for for anybody not receiving checks, we could just, unless this drags out for a very tremendous amount of time. Bonnie, you tell me if you're comfortable with just relying on these numbers. They're all done as of October 1st, but unless they're receiving checks, I would say just use those numbers, and when they make their decision, do it.
Okay.
Those who might be receiving checks and then decide to do a cash out, I would advise to redo the present value at that point.
Right. Because, and the reason why I say that is because I noticed that as of June 30th, there was 1.411, I think is what Jennifer said, and now there's 1.35. So. And that may have been because we paid a lot of expenses all at one time, because we, we didn't have a quorum at the last meeting.
So just real quick. I still don't understand if I'm entitled my benefit the 1st of January, do I get my benefit first?
Bonnie, the one gentleman, is it Mr.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, his question is, he's getting ready to commence on January 1st. So let's say, we're still kind of putting the finishing touches on this in January. Could
Well, he's
he-
gonna, so we're not gonna not pay anybody. I mean, so the idea is that we will pay from the pension fund and then transfer the benefits into the substituted trust to pay into the substituted trust. So we're not, the idea is that we will pay every month on the 1st of the month, and we will coordinate it all so that there is always a monthly benefit payment.
Starting January 1st.
Well, for you, because you're vested terminated, but for everybody,
Right.
that they'll get what they're due as it's due.
No hiccups. There'll be a seamless transition for the retirees.
Well,
And
I mean, that's my hope. Yes. I'm not, we're not intending to miss anybody's benefit payments.
And any retirees who decide at the end of the process, yes, I want to cash out, and let's say it's October 1st is come and gone, it will. Then we'll redo the present value. We have to carve out what they received after October 1st and redo the cash out value and then give it to them if that's what they want.
Correct. And so we'll have to, again, coordinate that so we make sure that we're distributing, what they're entitled to.
Right, because the cash out value, if they were, their retiree is gonna be more on scenario A number wise.
Right, because Robert, if Robert wants to decide to cash out, see, he already got a couple checks, so we'll subtract from the cash out value. Some money from that. so.
347, not the 627.
Yeah,
Right, the 627 is assuming that we purchased annuities outside of the plan. So the 347, next week is going to be less if we pay it out in November. Does that make sense to you all?
Yeah, let's say you want to do November 1st, so it's gonna be a little bit less because you'll receive your October check and we need to carve that out.
right, yeah.
And you don't get the 600. That's it. That's what we'd have to give to a private annuity company. You probably say, wait, I'm gonna invest, I'm the private annuity company, give me my 600. Nope,
Don't work that way.
nope.
It looks good on paper. Well, Robert's about the only one that's got to do his homework.
Yeah.
Got options now.
Yeah. So what kind of date do you think we need, like 3 months or 2 months for you, or?
Oh, I'm good. It'll run through the process where it'll take several months at least. I think.
Yeah, I think we can get the releases and elections done pretty quickly and get them out in early October, and then look to get them back for November 1st.
No, they're planning a meeting.
And then, if we'll have to have a meeting to review the substituted trust fund. But unless there's any hiccups, we can commence the distributions. I think, I can't think of why we wouldn't be able to, under the scenario C, to commence the distributions of the lump sums once we receive the paperwork back and in good order.
I agree.
Sounds good.
Will you move the money out of Bank of New York then? Move the money?
I didn't understand that, I'm sorry.
Never mind.
So
this
it
is,
stays in,
It's in the
unless,
market.
yeah, so right now it's invested, but as we pay it out, then it would obviously be. but
Yeah.
While it's in the trust, it would still be at PNY.
Okay.
Yeah, the timing's all good. It's Thanksgiving, Christmas money.
Yep.
All right. Let's finish building my house. money.
Doug, we're encouraging rollovers.
That's right.
Christmas rollover.
All right, I don't have anything else unless you all have questions or any of the participants have questions.
Jennifer, do we need to move that one fund?
Yeah, so
That's
if we could,
over.
if we
That's
could
over.
rebalance just to get that domestic equity into line. I had put together a rebalance that would use also the cash that's in the cash account, so. Take that into account.
So I guess the question is whether you think all the money should be invested or if we should leave 103 kind of.
I was gonna say, if we took about 68,000 out of domestic equity, that would bring you into target. If you just put that piece in cash, that would have you have about 100,000 in cash right now. So if they're looking to get those distributions out, say November, those funds would be.
It'd be
would
there, right, just like that.
Correct.
Yeah.
And this way, if equity markets, right now they're doing great. I don't want to say something,
Oh, I know.
something goes bad between now and November. I don't want that to all be sitting in the equity markets and then risking that. So I think if we just took about 68,000 out of domestic equity, that would put us.
Okay, I shall move on that.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
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 So Jennifer, we'll need to coordinate with the custodian on this, so that they know, do they cut the checks?
Yes, I think.
Okay.
Who does all the behind the scenes stuff, but I assume they're
Yeah,
doing the
but
checks and
back
everything.
in New York.
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Okay.
Don't have anything else?
No?
Unless Jennifer's got something else? Doug?
I'm good for now. I think you guys just voted to see the actuary a lot more, so.
That's all right.
That's
Yeah.
All right.
All right, Bonnie, it's you if you need anything else from us.
Okay, all right. Thank you all very much. I appreciate all the time and energy you guys put into this.
Yeah.
Thank you, Doug, thanks, Jennifer.
Thanks. See you soon.
Second.